Welcome, dear viewers, to a world where darkness and mysticism meet in the creepiest forms. Here, in this abandoned corner of the internet, we will delve into the darkest corners of the human imagination. Prepare for awe-inspiring horror, as each of our stories is imbued with sinister secrets that lurk in the darkness of the night. Scary stories that remain beyond your imagination are waiting for you on our channel. Don't forget to turn on the lights, get comfortable, and hold on tight, because now we are going into the world of nightmares. Are you ready for it? Then welcome to our scary story. Thomas had always been drawn to the thrill of adventure. He was a young man, with an insatiable curiosity that often led him into situations he couldn't have imagined. On this fateful autumn evening, he found himself walking on the precipice of an ancient forest known for its terrifying legends. The leaves, now tinged with vibrant shades of red and gold, crunched beneath Thomas's boots as he ventured deeper into the woods. His heart pounded with excitement, for he had heard stories of this forest since he was a child. Tales of haunted woods, spectral apparitions, and the terrifying legend of the shape-shifting beast, the werewolf, had always captured his imagination. As he ventured further into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around him, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, and their leaves whispered secrets in the chill breeze. He couldn't help but feel a shiver of apprehension, but his thirst for adventure overpowered his unease. The sinking sun cast long, eerie shadows that danced among the trees. It was as though the forest itself was coming alive, ready to ensnare any who dared to enter. Thomas felt a thrill in his chest, a sense of exhilaration that he was finally living one of the legends he had grown up hearing. His footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet woods, and the distant howling of the wind added an eerie soundtrack to his solitary journey. He began to notice the silence around him, the absence of birdsong, and the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as though aware of his presence. The deeper he ventured, the thicker the undergrowth became, making his path increasingly challenging. But Thomas pressed on, unable to resist the call of the forest's mysteries. The legends had described hidden treasures, cursed artifacts, and unsolved riddles that were said to be scattered throughout the woods. His heart quickened, and he could hear the distant, haunting howls more clearly now. They sounded mournful and unsettling, like the cries of lost souls. Thomas had to remind himself that it was just his imagination running wild, fueled by the stories he'd heard. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the forest was now bathed in twilight. As he continued forward, he stumbled upon a peculiar stone, half buried in the ground. It seemed to have strange markings etched into its surface, a language he couldn't decipher. His curiosity was piqued, and he knelt down to examine it more closely. Just as he was about to touch the mysterious stone, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the forest, closer this time. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, and he hastily withdrew his hand. The once thrilling adventure now took on a menacing tone, and he realized that he might have ventured too deep into the woods. A sudden rustling in the nearby bushes startled Thomas, and he felt his heart race. He strained his eyes to pierce the encroaching darkness, but he could only make out shadowy forms. The woods seemed to come alive with movement, and he had an unnerving feeling that he was being watched. He knew he should turn back, but a stubborn determination held him in place. The legends whispered about hidden secrets, and he was sure he was close to uncovering one. He couldn't let fear deter him now. The howling continued, growing louder and more frenzied, and he realized that it wasn't the wind or his imagination. It was real, and it was getting closer. Panic surged through him, and he pushed himself to his feet, leaving the strange stone behind. As he turned to retrace his steps, he came face to face with a pair of gleaming yellow eyes. The eyes belonged to a massive, dark figure, its body partially hidden in the underbrush. In that horrifying moment, time seemed to freeze, and the legends of the forest rushed back to him. He had found the werewolf. The creature's mouth opened wide, revealing razor-sharp teeth. Its growl was a menacing symphony that seemed to resonate with the very heartbeat of the forest. Thomas's instincts took over, and he bolted back the way he had come, fueled by a primal fear that he had never known before. The werewolf gave chase, its howls now a thundering chorus of dread. Thomas sprinted, his lungs burning and his heart pounding. The forest around him was no longer a place of adventure, but a nightmarish labyrinth where every shadow concealed danger. Branches whipped at his face, and thorny underbrush clawed at his legs, but he pressed on. The menacing growls and howls of the pursuing beast were a relentless reminder that his life hung in the balance. He could see the edge of the forest ahead, the distant glow of the moonlight beckoning him to safety. With a final burst of adrenaline, he burst from the forest's clutches, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. He didn't stop until he was far from the looming trees and the creature that dwelled within. As he looked back at the forest, his heart still racing, he realized the legends were not mere stories to be taken lightly. The terror he had faced was real, and the ancient woods held secrets that were better left undiscovered. With a newfound respect for the forest's mysteries, Thomas knew he had narrowly escaped the clutches of the werewolf. He couldn't shake the image of those gleaming yellow eyes from his mind, and he understood that the legends were born from horrifying truths that lurked in the depths of the autumn twilight. Little did he know that his encounter with the werewolf was only the beginning of a dark and harrowing journey into the heart of the haunted woods, where the line between legend and reality would blur, and where the secrets of the forest would demand a price he could never have imagined. In the days that followed his heart-pounding encounter with the werewolf, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that the ancient forest still held secrets untold. His nights were restless, filled with dreams of yellow eyes and menacing howls, and his days were spent in a state of constant unease. It was as though the forest's malevolent presence had seeped into his very being. One crisp morning, as the sun cast a warm glow on the world, Thomas decided to visit the nearby village. He hoped to learn more about the legends and mysteries that shrouded the woods, and perhaps find some answers to the questions that had been plaguing him. The village was a quaint collection of cottages and cobblestone paths, surrounded by fields of golden wheat and grazing sheep. The inhabitants seemed friendly enough, but their faces carried an air of solemnity that caught Thomas's attention. It didn't take long for him to realize that they knew of the forest's secrets, and they held those secrets close to their hearts. He struck up a conversation with a weathered man at the village inn. The man's name was Elijah, and he was a local farmer with deep roots in the area. Over mugs of ale, Thomas cautiously broached the topic of the forest. "Many a tale's been told about them woods, lad," Elijah said, his eyes clouded with memories. "The forest's got a dark past, it does. Them that venture too far in often don't come back." Thomas leaned in, eager for more information. "What can you tell me about the legends? I've heard stories of a werewolf and other strange happenings." Elijah's gaze grew even graver. "Aye, the werewolf, they say it's a guardian of sorts, protecting them secrets buried deep within. But it ain't the only thing that haunts them woods. It's the nights when the moon fights its way through the heavy clouds that you should be most wary of." "The nights when the moon breaks through the clouds? What happens then?" Thomas asked, his curiosity piqued. Elijah leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Them nights are when the old magic stirs. The forest comes alive with strange happenings. The air is thick with power, and them that venture in often don't return. It's as though the very soul of the forest awakens. Thomas couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. It was clear that the villagers regarded the forest with a mixture of reverence and fear. He decided to dig deeper into the forest's history and legends. As he explored the village, he stumbled upon a small, dusty library tucked away in a forgotten corner. It was filled with old books and crumbling manuscripts. With each page he turned, the story of the forest began to unfold. The forest, it seemed, had a history that extended back centuries. The ancient inhabitants of the area had revered it as sacred, believing it to be a place where the boundaries between the earthly realm and the supernatural were thin. They had conducted rituals under the full moon and left behind cryptic writings and drawings that seemed to be a record of their mystical experiences. One particular text stood out, a leather-bound journal that was believed to be the diary of a local herbalist from centuries past. It described the strange occurrences during the nights when the moon pierced through the clouds. The herbalist had written about eerie lights dancing among the trees, whispering voices in the wind, and encounters with enigmatic creatures. Thomas was drawn deeper into the journal's accounts, and as he read on, a chilling realization dawned on him. The descriptions in the journal bore a striking resemblance to what Elijah had described earlier. It seemed that the villagers had been living in the shadow of the forest's ancient magic for generations. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to understand the mysteries that surrounded him, Thomas decided to venture back into the forest. Armed with the knowledge he had gathered, he hoped to uncover the secrets hidden beneath the dark canopy of trees. He returned to the forest as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like ghostly fingers. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to hold its breath once again. The legend of the moon through the clouds haunted him, but he couldn't resist the allure of the enigmatic woods. As he ventured deeper, the darkness of the forest was suffocating, and the ominous howling of the wind made him feel as though he had entered a different world. He found himself surrounded by ancient trees that bore markings and symbols etched into their bark, much like those in the herbalist's journal. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was retracing the steps of those who had come before him, seeking the forest's secrets. The moon, hidden by heavy clouds, cast eerie, shifting patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Thomas reached a clearing where he discovered an enormous, gnarled oak tree. At its base, there were symbols and inscriptions, just like the ones he had read about. As he examined them, a strange sensation washed over him. It was as though the forest was trying to communicate, to reveal its mysteries. As he touched the inscriptions, the ground beneath him rumbled, and a cold wind began to whip around him. The moon, shrouded in clouds, suddenly broke through, casting an otherworldly glow on the ancient oak. The symbols on the tree began to glow with an ethereal light, and Thomas felt a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced. In that moment, he understood that the legends were not just stories. The forest was alive with ancient magic, and he was now a part of it. He had unlocked a door to a world where the line between reality and myth blurred, and he could feel the presence of something ancient and powerful, lurking just beyond his perception. With a sense of foreboding and wonder, Thomas knew that his journey into the heart of the forest had only just begun. The moon through the clouds had revealed a new dimension of the woods, one that held the promise of both enlightenment and terror. The forest had claimed him, and there was no turning back. The moon, shrouded by heavy clouds, cast an eerie and muted glow on the ancient forest as Thomas stood before the luminous markings on the gnarled oak. It was as if the forest itself had responded to his touch, revealing a secret long hidden. He felt a strange energy coursing through him, and the very air seemed alive with ancient power. Thomas knew that he had uncovered something profound, and he was determined to understand the forest's mysteries. His journey had taken an unexpected turn, and he couldn't turn back now. As he contemplated the ethereal markings, the forest whispered its secrets in the wind, and he could almost make out the voices of those who had come before him. Deep in thought, Thomas continued his exploration, venturing further into the woods. The darkness was impenetrable, but he felt strangely guided by an invisible hand. He couldn't ignore the sense that the forest itself was leading him to a revelation, but he couldn't have anticipated the horrors that awaited him. After what felt like hours, Thomas stumbled upon a clearing where an ancient, gnarled tree stood alone. This tree was different from the others. It exuded an air of malevolence. As he approached, he noticed a gnarled and twisted shape hanging from one of its branches. Horrified, Thomas realized that it was a severed wolf's paw, preserved with eerie precision. It was a chilling sight, and he couldn't deny the unease that had settled deep within him. He knew that this forest held dark secrets, but the implications of what he had found were beyond his imagination. As he stood before the grotesque display, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You've come far, young one." Thomas spun around, his heart pounding, to find an elderly man emerging from the darkness. The man's face was lined with age, and his eyes held an otherworldly wisdom. "Who are you?" Thomas asked, his voice quivering. "I am Ezra," the man replied. "I have watched over this forest for longer than you can fathom. It is not by chance that you have found your way here." Thomas, still trembling, asked, "What is the meaning of all this? The legends, the markings, the severed paw, they all seem connected." Ezra nodded solemnly. "You have uncovered the heart of the forest's secrets, but you must also know the price of your curiosity. The legends are no mere tales. They tell of a curse that has befallen this land, a curse of the werewolf." Thomas's eyes widened in realization. The werewolf, the markings on the trees, and now this severed paw. It's all connected to the curse, isn't it? Ezra's gaze turned grave. "Aye, the legends speak true. Long ago, this forest was home to a coven of powerful witches. They sought to harness the power of the moon to gain immortality. In their arrogance, they summoned a curse upon themselves and the land." The old man's voice quivered with the weight of history. "The curse gave birth to the first werewolf, a creature of immense power and insatiable bloodlust. It prowls the forest, seeking to satisfy its hunger." Thomas couldn't fathom the magnitude of what he had stumbled upon. Is there a way to break the curse, to end the suffering of the forest and its inhabitants? Ezra's eyes bore into Thomas's with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. The curse can only be broken if a willing soul takes on the burden of the werewolf. But it comes at a great cost, young one. To become the werewolf is to be forever bound to the forest, to roam the woods in eternal torment. Thomas felt the weight of the decision that lay before him. Could he sacrifice his humanity to save the forest and its people? The forest had drawn him in, and now it demanded a choice that could change the course of his life forever. As he contemplated his decision, a mournful howl pierced the night, echoing through the forest. It was the sound of the werewolf, and it seemed to draw closer, its presence palpable. The malevolent force of the curse was awakening, and Thomas knew that he had little time to decide. Ezra placed a gnarled hand on Thomas's shoulder. "The forest has chosen you, young one. The path you walk is a treacherous one, but it is the path of destiny. The curse must be broken, and it falls to you to make that choice." With those words, Ezra disappeared into the darkness, leaving Thomas alone with the weight of his decision. The curse of the werewolf loomed large, and the forest's dark secrets wrapped around him like a shroud. He knew that the choice he made would determine not only his own fate, but the fate of the ancient forest and its inhabitants. As the howling of the werewolf grew louder, Thomas made his decision. The forest had claimed him, and he would embrace the burden of the curse to save the land he had come to love. The moon through the clouds had revealed the forest's dark heart, and now he would become a part of its chilling legend. The forest was eerily silent as Thomas made his way deeper into the heart of the ancient woods. The moon, casting an otherworldly glow, fought to pierce through the heavy clouds that hung low in the sky. Full moon night was fast approaching, and he knew that time was running out. He felt the weight of his decision, the burden he had willingly taken on. To save the forest and its inhabitants, he had chosen to embrace the curse of the werewolf. The very thought of it sent shivers down his spine, for he knew what it meant. It was a sacrifice of his humanity, a pact with the malevolent force that had plagued the land for centuries. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the markings on the trees became more frequent and intricate. They seemed to whisper the secrets of the curse, and he couldn't help but feel that he was following an ancient trail, a path that led to the heart of the forest's darkness. The full moon loomed above, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, awaiting its awakening. Thomas knew that he had to unlock the secrets that lay hidden within the gnarled oak tree, the source of the forest's ancient power. He reached the clearing where the twisted tree stood, the severed wolf's paw still hanging from one of its branches. As he approached, he could feel the malevolent presence of the curse growing stronger. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and he knew that the moment of reckoning had come. With a deep breath, he touched the gnarled tree, and the forest responded. The markings on the tree began to shimmer with an eerie light, and the ground beneath him trembled. The moon, at last, broke free from the clouds, casting its silvery light upon the clearing. The forest seemed to come alive with ancient magic. Eerie lights danced among the trees, and a whispering wind carried voices from the past. The markings on the tree began to shift and transform, revealing a hidden chamber beneath the roots. As Thomas descended into the chamber, he was overwhelmed by a sense of foreboding. The walls were adorned with more markings and symbols, ancient incantations that had bound the curse to the forest. It was as though the chamber held the very essence of the werewolf's power. In the center of the chamber, he found an ancient tome, bound in leather and filled with cryptic writings. It was the key to understanding the curse and finding a way to break it. With trembling hands, he began to decipher the writings, uncovering the dark history of the forest. The witches of old, in their quest for immortality, had harnessed the power of the moon, but their arrogance had unleashed a curse that had bound them to the forest. The first werewolf, born from their folly, had become an embodiment of their greed and malevolence. Thomas realized that the forest had become a prison, not only for the cursed witches but also for the werewolf, a creature of untold power and torment. The curse had ensnared them all, and the only way to break it was to confront the very embodiment of the curse itself. As he delved deeper into the writings, he discovered a ritual that had the power to sever the curse and free the forest from its malevolent grip. The ritual required the willing sacrifice of the one who had taken on the curse, the one who had embraced the beast within. With a heavy heart, Thomas understood what he had to do. He had to confront the werewolf, to challenge the dark entity that had haunted the forest for centuries. He had to embrace the full moon's power, to become the werewolf, and then to perform the ritual that would end the curse. The forest seemed to respond to his decision, and the malevolent presence of the curse closed in around him. The markings on the chamber's walls glowed with an eerie light, and a chilling wind began to swirl through the chamber. As the full moon reached its zenith, Thomas felt the transformation begin. The pain was excruciating, as his bones shifted and his body contorted. He was becoming the very embodiment of the curse, the werewolf. With newfound power and a heart heavy with purpose, he emerged from the chamber, ready to confront the dark entity that lurked in the forest. The malevolent force of the curse was now a part of him, and the full moon shone bright, casting its silvery light upon the forest. The forest seemed to awaken, and eerie lights danced among the trees. Thomas could feel the presence of the werewolf drawing closer, a force of pure malevolence. The moment of reckoning had come. The battle between his human nature and the animal within raged on as he tracked the werewolf through the forest. The malevolent force was cunning and relentless, and the forest itself seemed to conspire against him. Finally, he confronted the werewolf, a nightmarish creature that seemed to embody the very essence of the curse. Its yellow eyes glowed with malevolence, and its fangs glistened with hunger. The full moon bathed it in an eerie light, and the two beings faced each other in a deadly dance. The battle was fierce and brutal, a struggle for dominance between the human and the beast. As the curse of the werewolf clashed with the curse of the forest, Thomas understood that this was a battle not only for his life, but for the soul of the forest itself. With a final, desperate lunge, Thomas managed to overpower the werewolf, pinning it to the ground. The creature's growls turned into mournful whimpers, and its yellow eyes stared into his with a strange mix of hatred and relief. In that moment, Thomas performed the ritual, invoking the power of the full moon to sever the curse. The forest itself seemed to tremble as the incantation echoed through the trees, and the curse of the werewolf was broken. The werewolf's form began to shift and contort, and the creature let out a deafening howl of agony. It transformed into a spectral, ethereal figure that seemed to dissolve into the very fabric of the forest. The curse had been broken, and the ancient woods were free at last. As the full moon waned, Thomas felt the power of the curse receding, and his own form began to shift back to its human state. He had fulfilled his destiny, breaking the curse that had plagued the forest for centuries. The forest, once shrouded in darkness, now seemed to breathe with new life. The eerie lights disappeared, and the markings on the trees began to fade. The malevolent force of the curse was gone, and the ancient woods were free from its grip. Exhausted and battered, Thomas knew that his journey had come to an end. The forest had claimed him, but in doing so, he had saved it. The moon through the clouds had revealed the darkest secrets of the woods, and he had emerged from the ordeal forever changed. As he gazed at the now serene forest, he understood that the legends and mysteries had been laid to rest. The curse of the werewolf was no more, and the ancient woods could finally find peace. The forest whispered its gratitude in the gentle rustling of leaves, and Thomas knew that he had become a part of its enduring legend.